What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're doing another Path of Exile video. Now, all I'm going to be doing in this video is talking about player retention. This has been kind of a term and this concept that has been being thrown around the community for, I don't know, maybe about a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe up to 2 years. And it's kind of a hard thing to dial down. And when you really look at player retention in Path of Exile, it all kind of leads to the same point, unfortunately. So my question in this video, and I'm going to kind of pose maybe 2 or 3 different takes on why player retention really isn't getting that much better. And my question to you is, if you're watching, why do you play Path of Exile and for how long? I know some people it's for generating as much currency as they can, playing with friends, doing solo self-found, playing hardcore, playing as many just random builds as you can, and that's okay. All these things should be accessible, but my question in this video that I'm going to hopefully try to give you guys my opinion on, whether you agree or not, I'm not really sure. My opinions on why player retention really isn't getting that much better, even though the game is supposedly getting better. Now, I know this league has been very controversial, but let's just not look at this one little isolated incident. Let's kind of look holistically at Path of Exile and kind of maybe try to assess why player retention isn't getting better the more and more the game expands. If you guys like this video and things like it, remember to subscribe below, hit the like and the bell button while you're down there as well. We go live on Twitch every day, twitch.tv/Drydeck_TV, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Without further ado, let's get into this video. Let's go! All right, let's not waste any time going over some random stuff. Let's just dive right into it, okay? So my first idea on why player retention is not as good as it could be or what everyone expects it to be, and this is probably the most likely and least controversial reason why player retention isn't as good as it should be or could be. It's just the fact that people want to play different games. There's so many games out there that people spread their time between. I know people play like World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2, RuneScape, Stardew Valley, just endless amounts of games. And just looking at ARPGs, specifically since Path of Exile is an ARPG, you've got Diablo 2, you got Diablo 1 to a lesser extent, Grim Dawn, Last Epoch, and then now you've got you got Wolcen, you got some, things online with like Chronicon, like a free-to-play browser-based action-ish RPG. There's just so many games for people to play that I think people's attention is being divided amongst these games. And I know that Chris Wilson has said it's good for games. You should play for 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, and then come back later when there's a new league, something comes out that you may or may not like and you want to give it a try. This kind of natural ebb and flow between peak player count and sustained player count really probably just comes down to the fact that people just want to play different games, and that's okay. It's more than likely the most logical reason on why player retention isn't getting any better. Besides any kind of malicious intent from the developers to push out people who don't want to play the game they want to, I just think that people just want to play different games with limited time throughout the day, especially if you're someone who has a job and has a family and can only play 2-3 hours a day. Sometimes you just don't want to play Path of Exile. Sometimes you want to play Stardew Valley, or you want to play Pokemon Red on an emulator, stuff like this. It's quite okay for people to come and go from the game, and like Chris Wilson said, he does believe it's healthy, and so do I. If you focus all of your attention on one game, and I can speak for myself, and I'm sure you out there as well watching this video, you get burnt out on video games fairly quick if you just grind and grind and grind and grind. Now, I know people who are very passionate about certain games, you look at Mr. Llama SC and other people who stream Diablo 2. They've been playing Diablo 2 since they were kids. I have as well. And they still just grind and grind and grind because it's their main jam. That's what they like. They just like that game so much, they're willing to do that game all the time, and that's okay. I just don't think Path of Exile in its current form and the last, 2 or 3 years has been developing itself to be that for the vast majority of players, and I know that they're trying to cast a wide enough net to get as many people in as a wide audience as they can, because that's what games need. They need a wider and wider audience to then grow the game, get more money for the company, and expand upon it, and that's okay. So the second reason I think player retention is probably not going to get much better in the coming future, and especially not what it is right now, is because Path of Exile is building conflicting incentive bases inside of its own game. So Path of Exile has kind of gone way too wide in its incentive basis for playing the game. So what I mean by that, Path of Exile from its very inception was more akin to like older ARPGs, okay? So the gearing system was almost wholly unique with the gem links and the skill tree, right? That was kind of what PoE sold itself on. Brand new character development that has never been seen before. And it's still fairly the same from beginning to where it is now. But the incentive for playing the game back then was extremely different than what it is now. And this is more of a symptom, I think, of modern culture and everyone's need to optimize their time engaging with something because they want to feel like they're getting the most out of their time. It's a natural human reaction, and I don't blame anybody for not feeling like they're getting enough out of the game. But when Path of Exile first came out, when, you know, they were excited to bring this small indie dev company to, you know, the 10,000 people that were playing, it was really like just like a sandbox. You just got in there. There wasn't a whole lot of content to do. Like, I think when I first started playing, Act 3 had like just came out of beta phase, so it was like towards the end of open beta. And my incentive originally was to just put on as many gems as I possibly can. Just try anything and everything. And it was so nice. I didn't really care about how much currency I was making. I didn't really care about the power of my character. All I wanted to see is how this game functioned. And discovering those functionalities between different interactions, just on the gems alone and how you link them, really is where I think the seed for Path of Exile player base really started. As we've moved more and more into the modern age where they keep adding more monsters, they keep adding more loot, they keep adding more items, bases, gems, crafting options, end game zones, different ways to now modify your maps in ways that were just like probably inconceivable back in the day, right? The incentives, I think, have shifted or fragmented in the community itself. So if we look at Trade League, and I will use this as a basis of argument because the majority of players play on Trade League. Not a lot of people play Solo Self-Found, even though I am currently still playing Solo Self-Found. I played Trade League for literally like 90% of the time I've ever played Path of Exile. So just using that as an example, okay, so Trade League. The incentive for Trade League, like as we've gotten further and further into the modern age of PoE, how much currency, how much stuff am I getting per hour that makes me feel good enough to want to keep playing the game? I know people have made comments on my last video like, no, explosions are the entire reason Path of Exile is fun. I want to kill as many monsters as I can. I want to take the most meta builds that do the most damage, that move the fastest, that have the most defenses for the least investment, and generate as much currency as I possibly can. That is their entire basis of playing the game. And if you're one of those players, that is fine. I'm not here to tell you what you're doing is wrong. All I'm saying is that that is an incentive basis for a certain subset of people. And with Trade League specifically, I think that's how most people perceive Trade League. Trade League is how much of currency can I get per hour to feel like it's worth engaging with the game. Now, I know there's people that play Path of Exile on Trade League that use it as a vehicle to try weird and wacky builds. There's plenty of YouTubers out there like Wolfio, for example. He makes the most ridiculous builds I've seen. Captain Lance, he kind of goes against a lot of like the meta, and he does some really wild builds too, which is really cool to see. I really like that. And those people, I think, are shining examples of what Trade League should and could be if they were to kind of change incentive bases away from just how much money am I making per hour versus how many cool builds can I make per week, per 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. How many cool things can I get done in this limited time window, which is called a league? So now, of course, there's going to be people who play Solo Self-Found, and I've started playing Solo Self-Found too, and I have to say, my incentives for playing the game has definitely shifted from getting out of that Trade League environment. But when I play Solo Self-Found now, my incentive isn't, okay, I have played for 4 hours. Let me look at my excellence and see how much currency I've generated. It has been like so relieving having that frenetic pace of like how much stuff am I generating per hour, and almost having like this neurotic like, I'm only getting this amount. Having that ability to just relax and just literally get on the game and just play an hour. And the little bit of progression I make within that 1 hour feels infinitely better than the 6, 7, 8 hours I used to grind just focusing solely on how much currency I'm making. So that incentive basis for me is to just now interact with the game and just play the game. I don't have to worry about getting the most amount of sextants. I don't have to worry about getting scarabs. I don't have to worry about building my Atlas tree perfectly to hyper-focus on heist or delirium mirrors or harvest crafting or anything. All this stuff is just gone, and it's amazing. And that is a good incentive base for a game because it allows people to not feel like they're missing out on everything. That term FOMO is very, very prevalent, and it can create like vicious cycles among the player base of, okay, if I'm not generating X amount of hour, I am not being productive with my time. And as humans, we only have so much time on Earth, right? You have to feel like you're getting your money's worth, essentially, out of the time. But that's not what Path of Exile was for many, many years. Maybe the first 4 or 5 years, it was just get on, play for 2-3 hours, maybe even just an hour, and just kind of fiddle around. And if you make it to endgame, cool. If you don't, it doesn't really matter because you're really not missing out on much. So the last reason why I think Path of Exile is probably never going to have the player retention numbers that most people expect it to have or want it to have, and will go onto Reddit or make YouTube videos about, oh, player retention's bad every single league, is because there is the core fundamental problem that grinding gear games has kind of conditioned us as players to not expect any sense of permanency to what we're doing in their game. So what I mean by that is every league that comes out, okay, it's a fresh restart. And I know a lot of people like that. And I'm someone who likes, changing things up. But when you go back to how Path of Exile started, its original incarnation that hooked people and got its name on the market to get it to the place it is now. Some people have made comments on my last video. Why do you keep talking about open beta? No one gives a shit. I give a shit, okay? The reason is because when you look back at Path of Exile, and I vividly remember this, all the old content creators like Colby Cheese, Moldran, Willy Wonka, Kriparian, they all played standard and hardcore because that was just the game back then. The majority of the game for the first, I think, 2 years, the majority of players played on those permanent leagues versus temporary leagues. And even when leagues came out, a lot of people would just play for a week, 2 weeks to see what the new mechanic is and then go back to standard or hardcore because there was a sense of permanency. There was an emotional connection with the character. Me personally, and it was I think it was 4 years before I finally got rid of him. My very first character that I got to maps with back in right after Path of Exile had come out was an Elemental Cleave Templar because I remember watching Kriparian race with it and I thought, man, that build is so sweet. He was the first character I got to maps with. He's the first character I think I got a 5 link on, right? And I killed T4 maps. And I was so emotionally attached to it. I remember just all the memories I had with it, getting through the game, all the hardships back then, because there was this emotional connection to characters, this sense of permanency. And I remember myself, even when leagues came out, I would play the league for 2-3 weeks to see what the new mechanic was and be like, okay, do I like it? Meh. Is it cool? Sure. But then I go back and play the character that I want to play because I have an emotional connection to it. Now, some people are probably going to point out, well, Diablo 2 has ladders. Yes, I understand that. But the game itself is so core fundamentally fun and people have such an emotional connection to characters. I would imagine there are people out there that have a character like a sorceress or a paladin or a druid that they've had for 10 years on non-ladder, because ultimately everything is built around funneling back into standard or, the permanent leagues in Diablo 2. It's exactly the opposite in Path of Exile. Everything is expendable. There's no connection to characters. You might like the mechanics of a character and the gimmicky things you can do with each character, but you don't have the same emotional connection to something to sustain yourself through playing the game when it's not very fun, aka the league sucks. If you look at other games that have been around a long time, World of Warcraft, Ultima, EVE Online, Dungeons and Dragons, these things that have just an immense amount of longevity and a sense of permanency to what you're doing, they tend to have player counts that are much higher even when the game is bad, because people have emotional connections to what they're doing. And it's an extremely important facet of the game that I think Path of Exile has designed themselves out of caring about. And just to drive the point home, I want to ask you, the viewer who's watching this video, a serious question. And I'll tell you now before I ask the question, I am guilty of not doing the question I'm going to ask you. When was the last time that you liked a character so much that you are willing to forsake the new shiny thing, the League, and actually go back and play it in spite of there being something new and shiny to play with? I haven't done that for years, and I do remember back when leagues first came out, I do remember playing like this, where I would play with the new thing for 3 weeks, but then I'd go back and play a character on the permanent leagues. I would honestly estimate as close to 100% of players in the last 5 years of Path of Exile have never done that, and I'm guilty of it. I haven't done it. Why I say it's a very important thing, because I know people who have played a rogue, a warlock, a warrior, a hunter, or any venue of MMOs or games that have been around for a long period of time. They have been playing the same tune or the same thing since the very minute they started playing up until now. And for some people in World of Warcraft, there are people who play a mage from level 1 in vanilla WoW in retail 2004 all the way up to current WoW. And that emotional drive to keep playing the game because you have such an emotional connection with that character drives people through all the bad times, all the ups and downs, because you love that game and you love how that thing interacts with the game, and you don't care about anything else. You are so invested into it, you are willing to play it even when people are telling you to quit playing it because the game sucks. All right, guys, that is going to be the end of this video. What is your opinion on why player retention isn't getting any better and why you think it might not actually get better in the future, regardless of how good the game actually gets? I've laid out my opinions, and whether you agree with them or not, I don't really mind, because it's healthy to have these discussions. A lot of people don't like my opinions, and that's okay. I'm not mad at anybody for not liking my opinions, but I'm not going to let that stop me from sharing my opinions, because I do genuinely care about this game more than almost any other game I've ever played ever. If you guys like this video, remember to subscribe down below, hit the bell button, all that stuff. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!